Welcome, everybody, to the Jake Feinberg Show. Beautiful Saturday afternoon here in Tucson at KJLL The Jolt. As I continue my journey along, interviewing my jazz heroes in an effort to articulate and highlight their lives and the meaning that they put into the arts and our culture in the 60s and 70s. And my guest today is an unheralded polyrhythmic drummer, Peter Magadini. He's a tremendous player who's worked with cats like Mos Allison and Don Menza, George Duke. He has formal education from the San Francisco Conservatory of Music and a master's degree from the University of Toronto. And he's also done studying abroad as well in a more tribal sense with the great tabla player Mahapurush Misra. He's also an author of several books, one entitled The Musician's Guide to Polyrhythms, which was voted number 6 on Modern Jazz Drummer magazine list of 25 greatest books of all time. That is saying a lot. He continues to teach in the Bay Area today. I'm very jealous. He lives in Marin County. He's also, for a period of time in the 70s, had a steady jazz gig in the Phoenix area. So there's a local angle to the Jake Feinberg Show today. Peter Magadini, it's an honor to welcome you to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Jake, thanks. Thanks for having me on.
You know, Peter, I want to start sort of back, and then I want to start at in the middle and go backwards, just for the point of reference for my audience. I picked up the album Polyrhythm from 1975 on vinyl, and you know, Peter, I've been studying Indian drumming relentlessly for the last probably 4 or 5 months, and in reading about you, I was just kind of blown away by the fact that this was really a passion of yours during the early part of your career, and I was just hoping you could talk a little bit about how you started as a drummer. Were you a rock drummer, or were you, and how did you veer eventually into polyrhythms?
Okay, well. That's a whole lot of questions there. I'll start with the polyrhythm question first, in that people in the music, especially in the drum world, know me for this. I was living in San Francisco going to the conservatory, and actually I didn't go to India. India came here.
Yeah,
and
that's
right. If you remember correctly, George Harrison had, with the Beatles, he had done some exploring of East Indian music, and he had sort of brought Ravi Shankar to the forefront. And that was right in the middle of the hippie days of 1965 here in San Francisco. And I was living here going to school, and so there was a group called the Society of Eastern Arts, and they brought the Ali Akbar Khan ensemble to teach that summer, several summers in Berkeley on the Berkeley campus at University of California. And so I signed up for the tabla class one summer, and that's how I studied with Mahapurush Misra. And started out with a whole lot of tabla players, and it just ended up with 4 of us. And 3 of us were musicians, and one of them turned out to be Ram Dass. It wasn't Ram Dass at the time. He was Richard Alpert. And I think that was his first excursion into East Indian art and the culture as well. And so it had a profound effect on everybody. With me, it turned out to be books. A Musician's Guide to Polyrhythms, Volume 1 and 2. And now it's called Polyrhythms, The Musician's Guide. It's just 1 volume, and it's published by Hal Leonard. And that's how that book came about.
I was going to say, could you talk a little bit about the time at the Ali Akbar Khan School? Because I've done a lot of research on that, and it's kind of funny because at the time they were always kind of, roving around looking for a permanent residence, and they found eventually they settled on a place at a time when Marin County was still relatively affordable. And to me, in what I can read, it sounds like a place where they wanted to make education affordable. They didn't want to put pressures on students as far as tuition were concerned. It was about love of music. It was about reaching a certain cognition level, and it was ultimately about a shared experience through the music. And I was just hoping you could elaborate on that a little bit.
Well, this was called the Society for the Eastern Arts when I went to it, and it wasn't yet the Ali Akbar Khan School, and he hadn't yet moved here. He was still in India, and he moved here and started his own school after I had moved to Los Angeles. So I went that one summer, 6 weeks, and I was there. I was on a scholarship of sorts, and so it wasn't free, but for what you got, it wasn't expensive either.
I just want to ask you,
all day long, 5 days a week with a master from India.
What is a scholarship of sorts? What did that mean back in the mid-'60s? Because we know now money is scarce for any of this kind of stuff. So how would that even come about? Did it come through like a grant writing process or through the conservatory? How did that work?
No. I was actually doing some photography at the time as a hobby, and I offered to, go around and take pictures of the classes and so forth if they could help me out with the tuition, because I couldn't quite make it on my own as a working musician, and I had a family and so forth. So that's what I did. It was kind of a stipend, if you might, So it had anyway. It was what it was,
I look back on that time. Well, I wasn't born during that time, but there's been a book published since then, and I wonder if you, when you say taking pictures, you took pictures of actual just concerts that took place, or just the
just in the classrooms with the various artists and the master musicians teaching and the students and so forth. Just for the archives. Whatever happened to him, I have no idea, but that was a long time ago, So, but I have to say that Mahapurush Misra was the tabla player with Ali Akbar Khan, and Ali Akbar Khan was Ravi Shankar's brother-in-law. So there was, a master musician, and then the relative Ali Akbar Khan was also this master musician. And I believe that there was a connection there. And it goes all the way back to George Harrison with the Beatles, if you want to follow it back to how that all started, as far as becoming popular and coming over here where people actually got exposed to it, And I think a lot of people had to be exposed to it in a big way for it to survive. And the reason why the exposure was so big is because the Beatles were so big. I mean, they sort of changed everything. When I lived here in the 60s, they hadn't come on the scene yet. And when they did come on the scene, a lot of things changed musically. But one of the things was that because of George Harrison's interest in this music, it came over here. And so some of us got a chance to actually study with these guys, and I was one of them.
I read Nat Hentoff's liner notes, and I don't play percussion myself. I'm kind of a singer, but what did it do to your brain listening to the polyrhythms? As far as like, did it expanded your ability to understand sound? Can you talk a little bit about how it expanded your ability to?
Basically, a polyrhythm is layering times on times. If you can think of a good analogy, maybe if you drop a pebble in a pool of water, the rings go out in a predictable way every time, and that's because there's a rule, a law of physics somehow that makes that happen the way it happens. Well, in music, you don't have to have one layer of rhythm, 2 or even 3 layers.
Did we lose him? Is he still there? Well, apparently we lost Peter Magadini, polyrhythm drummer, and he one of the things that he was talking about that was really quite fascinating was the idea that George Harrison, who was a member of the Beatles, he brought Eastern Indian music over to the States, and actually there's a great album by Ravi Shankar on the Dark Horse label, in which Ravi Shankar and his entire family essentially, played on the album. So this has been quite fascinating for me, and we're working our best to get Peter Magadini back on the line here as fast as we can. Just for a point of reference here, I wanted to read something here in the sense that Peter at one point returned to the Valley, and he went back and he brought 2 musical degrees with him, and we got Peter back on the phone. Peter, you there?
Yeah, I don't know what happened.
It's okay. No, keep going. You were doing great. So Harrison brought the appreciation of Eastern Indian music here, and Mahapurush, take it away from there.
Just basically, he taught me how to think about rhythm in a way that Africans and Indians have been thinking about it for years, and other cultures, and Afro-Cubans and Brazilians and so forth. But it seemed like we didn't have a system to get there. And so what I did was I just basically took the very simple ideas of layering rhythmic meters that work well with each other, and then subdivide them just like we do with our normal rhythm in the way anybody who learns a musical instruments learns how to play quarters, eighths, triplets, and sixteenths. Well, then all I did was take quarters, eighths, triplets, and sixteenths and put them in a related time. So if you go into 6/4, 1.5 times faster. Now that sounds very complex, but honestly, it's really simple. It's compared to what some of these things that these guys could play polyrhythmically. It's just some basic ABCs of rhythm that I felt that we all should know as musicians. So I got on this thing about, and I wanted to bring it to the forefront to everybody. And the other thing is, Indian musicians don't notate their music. It's all done by syllables. So I worked it out so I could notate the idea, but in our system. So that's basically what I got a chance to create, was to bring polyrhythms to our system of notation. And I'll tell you, if your listeners are still with me after all this...
No, they're not going to leave Peter Magadini. Don't worry about that.
There's more to my career than these books, but trust me.
But, like at that time, as best you can remember, what was... you said the class whittled down to eventually four other people, and you started writing these books. When in the Bay Area, when did you find you were in your best position to do writing? Was it in the morning? Was it in the evening? And how did you write it for the lay person? I think that's something that's extremely important, because I just as a point of reference, I was watching your YouTube videos with some of my students in my school who are drummers, and after about 3 or 4 times, I started to understand it. But I think there's a talent in writing for something that at least visually looks complex, but then putting it in the lay terms. And I was just wondering when you felt you were in your best kind of way of being able to write that stuff.
Well, I have to remember that. I was also deeply into my jazz drumming period at that time, and I was listening to drummers like Elvin Jones and there.
Yeah, we're here.
And so I really did this for musicians. I didn't do it for lay people. You have to understand something about music and how rhythm works to work them out, to be able to play them. But to hear it, if you go to my YouTube clip, Polyrhythms and Introduction, I start off with an African beat I'm playing all by myself. And I have 4 different ensemble players and what they play individually in that one clip in the beginning of the polyrhythm clip there, because it's so polyrhythmic. And now this is West African, this is not Indian. So it's so vital to our music because West African is where all our music, all the roots of our music, being jazz and Western music that has a rhythm to it, you can trace it all back to that. And so, that was another big, important influence on my life. So between those two things, I felt compelled to write this thing. I felt it needed to be written. So, I don't know if I did it in the morning. I did it all the time until it was done.
Mm-hmm.
And then I had a hard time getting it published. That was the next step. Nobody knew what I was talking about.
That's what I'm saying. It was quite revolutionary at the time.
Yeah, and so but I did find a publisher in Los Angeles, Bob Yeager at the Hollywood Professional Drum Shop had a small publishing company called Tri Publishing, and they put it out. And once it came out, musicians were into it. I didn't know it was so popular until I went to a music trade show, and people seemed to know who I was, and I was kind of amazed. I didn't realize that it was through this book that this book had taken on a life of its own. Let me put it that way, and kind of has all along. It's stayed in there. It's not something I sell huge numbers of, but it's consistent all the time. There's always people like yourself who are interested in a topic, and which is good. I mean, I think that's a healthy thing for music.
Let's we're talking with jazz drummer Peter Magadini, and Pete, I wanted to go back in time a little bit before that. Can you talk a little bit about your upbringing as far as your parents? Were they blue collar workers? Were they intellectuals? What kind of environment did you grow up in, and what kind of music were you exposed to as a young kid?
Well, my parents liked. Good question. My parents liked swing jazz, and they liked to dance, and so they weren't musicians. My father, when I was born, my father was in the service. He was a pilot in the Second World War, and then when he got out, my parents moved to Palm Springs. We were back east. I was born in Massachusetts, and then they moved to Palm Springs. And in Palm Springs, I had my mom worked in restaurants while my dad went to school on a GI Bill. So I'd hang with her sometimes, and hear some good music in some of the places in Palm Springs, and that's I started playing in the school band in Palm Springs when I was 10, in the 5th grade, and that's how it started for me. I'm a product of school band. If there's any school band directors out there listening, I want to say thank you to all you people for the hard work, and it's not easy being a school band director, trying to teach 30, 40 kids how to play 10 or 15 different instruments, and but these band directors that I had all through my public school education were all just terrific, and they're the reason why I became a professional musician, because they hung in there with me, and I didn't take any private lessons. I never took any private lessons till I was out of high school. So I was all a play-by-ear guy, and played rock, and I played in marching bands, and I pretty much did that. I played in marching bands, and I played in rock bands, and I played in country bands. By this time, we had moved to Phoenix, and my dad became a structural engineer and had his own firm in Phoenix. And so my background then, while I was in high school, was my parents and their friends were pretty much engineers and architects, and that's a high level of educated and talented and artistic people in their own right. So I was sort of surrounded by thinkers, and I think it rubbed off into my own way that I approached music and things as well. But I was exposed to the music through my parents as far as swing music and big bands and stuff, because they were really into it, and they used to like to dance to that music. So I think it had a big influence on me.
Yeah, modern American music back in the middle part of last century was bandstand. I mean, it was dancing music, and I remember talking to a good friend of yours, John Hurd, a while back, and he was talking about playing the bass. He's like, it's just about making people dance. You got to make people dance. You got to feel it. And if you don't, you're not doing your job. And that is not really jazz now. I don't know what it's like. I should also mention Peter plays several nights a week with the at Harris's Steakhouse with the Susan Chen Trio. Is that correct?
That's correct. Good for you. Yeah.
And it's more. I mean, I could be wrong, but it's a lot more egalitarian. I don't know what the right word is. It's just sort of jazz is taking on this sort of it's not a common folk kind of music. So you're paying more at the door. It's more about drinking. Maybe you take a date there, but it's not about boogieing down.
Well, that particular engagement is we play in another part of the restaurant in the lounge, and people who enjoy listening to music and having a fine dinner hang with us in there. So we actually have two parts of the restaurant. Some people and our music is piped into the other side too, but we're not in that room. We're just in there through the speakers in the restaurant. But
yeah, I don't mean specifically.
Otherwise, you can come and you I have a table right next to me. You can sit right next to me if you want to sit close to the drummer. We can be so close we can have a conversation. And sometimes I do, and sometimes I have drummers sitting there, and sometimes I have people. I just see them getting into the music. But we play a wide variety of different things, and if you want to dance to it, you can. We have a little space. People don't dance too often because it's really not set up for dancing. But it's a band that grooves pretty hard. So, I'm like John. I mean, I think that music has to feel good first, and if it doesn't get me that way, then I'm usually not in the band.
Yeah, you don't. That's what John said. He goes, I don't stick around too long after that. We got just about a minute and a half left before we go to a hard news break. We're joined by drummer Peter Magadini, who spent his formative years in the Valley when Phoenix had a vibrant jazz scene from '59 to '62. We have a whole lot more to talk about with Peter, and I can assure you, the second half hour is going to slow down a lot. We're going to play. It's going to be more like slower ballads, so to speak, Peter. We're not going to do a lot of up tempo stuff, but we're going to do some some
whatever.
We'll do some analysis. But I have to tell you, it's just so great to have you on the program, and we're going to talk. And I guess what I was trying to get at, and what I want you to think about as we go to break here, is the difference between jazz venues, not necessarily Harris's, but jazz venues now, and the half note where you were playing with George Duke and John Hurd back in the mid '60s, and talk a little bit about I've seen pictures of the half note, and talk about the feelings there and what was happening there musically, and sort of have we become more restrained as a society at large? That's just sort of a philosophical question. We're going to do a hard break, Pete, and you just hang tight. We'll come back on the other side, okay?
Very good.
All right now.
Brother Kenny Powell on the drums and Brother Larry McDonald on the bottom.
CNN Radio. I'm Barbara Hall. Engineers have begun opening the Morganza Spillway on the Mississippi River in Louisiana to save New Orleans and other cities downstream. CNN's Ed Lavandera is there.
This is a historic day. These gates have not been opened and needed for this kind of flooding in almost 40 years. Last time this was opened up was in 1973. So this is not something that people see very often in their lifetimes.
All that water will flood vast, low-lying areas of the state. The 2-month uprising in Syria has forced hundreds of people to head into Lebanon for safety. A UN official says most of those crossing the border are women and children. Father and son imams were arrested today in South Florida. Another relative was arrested in California. The U.S. Justice Department says all three provided support to the Pakistani Taliban. The most trusted name in news, this is CNN Radio.
Here's another Home Depot advantage. A special buy on 1 1/4 cubic foot bags of Miracle Grow potting mix for just $6.88. That's a guaranteed low price on organic soil proven to grow plants and vegetables up to twice the size. Find it lower anywhere else and we'll beat it by 10%, which means even bigger savings on even bigger plants. All thanks to Miracle Grow potting mix for just $6.88. More saving, more doing. That's the power of the Home Depot. U.S. only. See store for details.
Here's another question from the Geico Savings Mailbag.
Susan from Miami asks, do you believe virtue is its own reward?
Ah, yes, indeed I do. But I also think cash is a pretty nice reward. And cash is exactly what you could save when you switch to Geico.
Right.
Yeah, and Geico also offers rewards in the form of good driver discounts, multi-card discounts, and defensive driver discounts.
So maybe discounts are their own rewards.
Hard to argue with that.
For a free rate quote, visit geico.com to see how much you could save. Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on car insurance.
Folks, this is Jake Feinberg. Every Friday night I get takeout from Bai Tong Restaurant, which serves Tucson's most authentic Thai cuisine. Pad Thais, fresh vegetables, and spicy Penang curry are my personal favorites, but every meal is sumptuous and cooked to order. Located at 4853 East Speedway Boulevard, Bai Tong serves compelling and affordable lunch specials as well as a full dinner menu. Bai Tong has ingratiated itself with the community by providing a peaceful environment to enjoy a meal with friends and family. Open weekdays for lunch 11 to 3, 5 to 9:30 for dinner Sunday to Thursday, until 10 on Friday and Saturday. So come down to Bai Tong Restaurant at 4853 East Speedway Boulevard to experience a taste of Thailand. When Coffee Times first opened, many wondered how this standalone coffee hut could survive among the beasts of Java lore. But some 10 years later, the answer is a resounding yes. Located at 3401 East Speedway Boulevard, Coffee Times specializes in many different drinks from mocha fraps to lattes to my personal favorite, the Ice Power Coffee. The best part about Coffee Times is their convenient two-way drive-thru, lunch menu, and supreme service. Not to mention their weekly special. So next time you're in the area, head over to Coffee Times on Speedway between Alvernon and Country Club. It will definitely kickstart your day. Folks, this is Jake Feinberg. One of the first things I wanted to do when I moved to Tucson was find authentic Chinese cuisine. After a tip from the Chinese Student Association, I headed over to Badar Chinese Restaurant. Well, it's been 7 years, and I have never looked back. Located at 7321 East Broadway Boulevard, Badar has been a family-run operation since 1992. The award-winning chef produces succulent dishes from sizzling ginger chicken to salt and pepper shrimp. The thing that separates Badar from the rest is that the chef procures ancient oriental dishes with the exotic island flair of Taiwan. Most importantly, there are no gimmicks or razzle-dazzle at Badar. You won't find any flat-screen TVs or karaoke machines. Badar is a place to go enjoy good food and spend time with your family. It exudes peace and tranquility after a long week of work. So come down and check out Badar Chinese Restaurant. Hong Hao Chu. It's that good. Folks, this is Jake Feinberg. Being a father, I know there is nothing more important than your child's health. And nobody is more dedicated to children's health in Southern Arizona than Dwayne Dyson. Dr. Dyson is Tucson's finest pediatrician and has devoted much of his professional career to improving the lives of children. Located at 4530 East Camp Fort Lowell, Dr. Dyson's resume speaks for itself. After doing his undergraduate work at Cal Berkeley, his schooling took him to Morehouse School of Medicine, where he mentored young adolescents about the need for pediatric physicians in Atlanta, and worked extensively with infants at the Texas Children's Hospital. The special thing about Dr. Dyson is that while his in-house care is exceptional, he also prepares families about what to expect once they leave the office. Dr. Dyson provides comprehensive and honest analysis for all of his patients. Dr. Dyson and his family live and work in Tucson because he knows how vibrant and diverse the community is. He is committed to procuring a robust family health center that can instill trust and alleviate the concerns of parents. Like I said, his resume speaks for itself. For more information, check out DysonPediatrics.com.
Hi, this is Tommy DiMaggio. When your friends or relatives come to beautiful Tucson and you have already taken them to the Desert Museum in Sabino Canyon too many times, it's time for something different. What's different, you ask? Purple Mountain Pack Goats. That's me, Tommy DiMaggio, and my wonderful goats. We've been leading hikes in the Coronado National Forest for 15 years. We take people of all ages and abilities on beautiful hikes in the surrounding mountains and deserts. I provide great meals, animal companionships. We have day hikes or overnight hikes. We have been featured in Arizona Highways, the Sunday London Times travel section, National Geographic Canadian Travel Magazine. For information or for your personal hike, call 403-4056 or visit us on the web at azpackgoat.com or call 403-4056. Remember, bring your field guide, camera, and imagination. We'll bring the rest. A great lunch carried by the goats. 403-4056 or visit us on the web, azpackgoat.com.
If you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. Be a part of a new coalition with Jake Feinberg. The second half of his show starts right now.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Jake Feinberg Show. And if you're not part of the problem, you're part of the solution. And the man who's becoming part of the solution today is drummer Peter Magadini. Peter, I want to welcome you back to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Yeah, Jake.
So can we just pick up on where I left off with the vibe at the half note, but counter to what's going on in jazz now?
Yeah, that's funny. I still see some of the guys from the half note. I used to work there years ago. They come into the Harris now and then. Some of the bartenders and actually the owner too, Warren H. Warren, sometimes drops by and says hello. That club, I'll tell you how that happened. I was going to school at the conservatory, and George Duke was started school right after I did, and so we formed a trio, and so here was this 19-year-old. I mean, George Duke at 19 was playing great. I mean, he was a prodigy already. And so I was playing with George around, and we were doing some gigs, and we got John Hurt on bass. And so I had played in the half note with somebody else, an organ trio, and so I remembered the venue, and I had known that the organ trio had since left, and I had played with George Duke for about a year, and I ran into the owner at another club, and I said, I'm playing with this young piano player. I said, what are you doing at the half note? He says, Pete, I don't know. He says, we're sort of at a loss of what to do next. I said, listen, you got to listen to this kid, man. I said, he's, I was 22 myself, but I said, you got to listen to George Duke and our trio. Give us a couple.
Still there? We've been having technical problems all day with Polyrhythmic drummer Peter Magadini. He was just in the process of explaining the half note, which was a vibrant club in the Fillmore district in San Francisco, and he did trio work down there with George Duke and John Hurd. Al Chechi was also a part of it, but the crowds were filled with blacks and whites and all sorts of ethnic people, and the smell of patchouli was rampant throughout the place, and really it was a different scene. Whereas to now you go to the Regatta Bar and you're paying $40-50 an hour, $40-50 a show to see some great music, but it's a little more trite, and so I think that it's important to understand that we've changed in some ways over the last 40 years or so, and
we're back. Huh?
Yeah, no, it's we're just it's okay. Our phone is acting. We're right there. Keep going. We're fine.
All right. So anyway, to make a long story short, I started playing with George at the half note in '65, and I stayed there for a couple of years. And Al Jarreau came in, sang one night, and he got the job. So we were the first a trio, then we were a trio with Al Jarreau. And then after that gig ended, I stayed around here for a little while. Ended for me. I stayed around here for a little while. I was the house drummer at the Hungry Eye, and I was also working the Playboy Club when I wasn't at the Hungry Eye and doing that kind of work. And then I moved to L.A., and then that was a whole other period of my life when I moved to L.A. And so that was the start of the 70s. And then I played with Bobby Gentry and Diana Ross while I was in L.A. I was her first tour drummer.
So you were doing... Go ahead.
And I just played a lot of jazz in the jazz clubs around Los Angeles and stuff, And I have to mention one thing. All this time, since 1965 or 66, I have been playing with Mose Allison. And I still play with Mose Allison today. We're opening for Diana Krall in Lake Tahoe next month on the 18th.
Yeah, Mose occasionally meanders down to the Tucson area, and he is all business. He'll play 2 long sets. He will get up there. He will tell you exactly what he's playing. He'll play the tune, and he'll go on right to the next one. He is all business. But Pete,
well, I've been on those gigs. That's been me. You've been there. That's me. I'm the drummer.
It's possible that I saw you at the Temple of Art and Music a few years before I ever started this journey that I'm on right now. But we have a lot more to get to with Peter Magadini. And actually, Pete, what I tend to do with some of my guests is, we can talk all we want, but at the end of the day, people want to hear your sound, and I want to play a brief clip from a tune called Modulator, which is a tune that you and George co-wrote together. And when we come back, talk a little bit about it. Okay?
Absolutely.
Hit it. Yeah, so I still get I'm sweating right now. I had my daughter helped me pick that tune out this morning, Pete. But I mean, you take it from there.
Well, yeah, the modulator. I'm glad you let it play that long, because after Dave Young's bass solo there, you'll hear the rapid tempo that we're playing at shift to another tempo.
Exactly.
And
That's why
that tempo modulates back down. So what happens is we started at the tempo, and we modulate with metric modulations, which is a polyrhythmic term, to going into a new polyrhythmic time signature. Instead of just going to twice as fast, we're going up we're stepping up just 1.5 times faster, and then we're coming down 3/4 times as fast. So it goes up and down like a staircase of rhythmic modulations. And what better guys to have on a date to do that than George Duke and Dave Young from Canada, Oscar Peterson's last bass player, actually.
How does exactly? And I was listening to that today, and I said I need to, because I want to get George in on it, but I also wanted to get the rhythm section with you and Dave playing. And then when it came out of there, I noticed that there was clearly a metric modulation shift, if that's what you call it. And I wanted to ask you, is that something that you guys discussed before, or is that sort of a wave of, like as you say, a staircase that develops naturally?
Well, it could develop naturally, but I told the guys that what we're going to do with this tune is we're going to modulate up in quarter note triplets, and we're going to modulate down in half note triplets, and those are very easy metric modulations to make because they're easy to hear, and it would be more difficult if we were going to modulate up, let's say in 5, as 5/4 being the new tempo, and modulate back down in 5/, in maybe how would that work if we were modulate back down in 2.5/4 as the new tempo. I mean, those would be very abstract to do that. We'd have to practice that. But for this isn't too difficult to do that. But yeah, we had a little plan that was, but that was up to we just did it whenever we felt we were going to go in that direction. We weren't counting bars or anything.
When you
just doing by feel.
It's a good. We're talking to Pete Magadini here, drummer, author, teacher, all everything polyrhythms. Pete, I wanted to ask you. It's a good segue here. Let's talk about your experience in Toronto, because from my take, and I was telling my board op Chris during the break, there were a few major labels in the 70s, Capitol, Columbia, just to name a few, and you had a lot of session drummers. You see the same guys reappearing over and over again, and you chose a different route. You chose to go to Toronto for several reasons, and why don't you talk a little bit about your experience up there as a player and as a teacher?
Yeah, well, I've always been teaching, so I haven't had a problem with finding good students wherever I've gone. I went up to Toronto because I had a young daughter who had a collarbone injury, and I took her to the emergency hospital in L.A. once, where I lived in Burbank, St. Mary's, and they wouldn't see her because I didn't have the money to spend on the emergency room. They wanted cash up front, and I didn't have it, so it kind of gave me a wake-up call. And I had been to Toronto with Bobby Gentry, and I'd done some TV there, and the guys were really good players, and they all invited me out. They said, boy, come on out. And I had this option to go because my wife at the time was Canadian, so I went out there as a landed immigrant and enjoyed good health care and enjoyed playing with some great musicians in Canada while I was there. And I went to the University of Toronto and did a master's degree just in case and nothing else was going to work out. I was still in school doing that. So, but I got so busy in Toronto, I just stayed there, and I became a studio musician up there for a while. So that's kind of it for Toronto. That was a while ago, but I got to play with some great players, and we don't know those guys very much down here, but you hear about them every so often when they come out, like Diana Krall or Oscar Peterson or Rush. That's a Toronto band.
Oh, even the great Ronnie Hawkins and the original members of the band, like Levon Helm and Rick Danko, and those guys. They were. Levon talks about the amount of music that you could see in Toronto back. He came from Arkansas, but still, amazing music scene up in Toronto.
Yeah, so there was a scene up there for sure. So I stayed up there. Then I moved up to Montreal before coming here to say I taught at McGill and Concordia universities, and I played the Montreal scene. And then my wife and I came back to. Well, it was her first time to San Francisco, and I was moving back to San Francisco. So we've been in the Bay Area since '97. So I'm sort of back home.
Yeah, I'm very envious of you, my friend. I mean, I love Tucson, and I love KJLL, the Jolt, but Marin County, it's special out there. Problem is, I don't want to live in a closet for $7 million a year.
It's a nice area to live. The weather's nice. But, I love Tucson when I go there and play. The only time I played there is with Moe's, but we've been there 3 times now, and
I think
I've enjoyed it every time.
I think it's great. There was obviously some sort of synergy there because I definitely saw you. It was a few years ago, but you were definitely on drums. I wanted to read a clip here from a magazine. It said, Fall 1975, Phoenix, real after-hours jazz until 4 a.m. with a very hip band, Zeke Zokler on alto and tenor sax, Prince Shell on piano, Curtis on bass, Peter Magadini on drums. Pete is famous to drummers as author of an advanced polyrhythm book and played amazing solos, while also being very musical, swinging group who loved Billy Higgins, often dedicated a tune to him. One night after a Zappa show, the Bongo Fury tour, great tour, saw Captain Beefheart alone in the El Bandito listening to Pete's band until 2 a.m. for a couple of sets. So, Pete, you after Toronto, you moved back to the Bay Area. When did you actually come back to the Valley of the Sun?
Well, I was just on a stop-off. I was actually had planned to move back to the Bay Area at that time, and I stopped in Phoenix, and I wound up at this club, the El Bandito, and the thing kind of took off. So I stayed there for a while in Phoenix because when things take, it's unusual to have something to take off in Phoenix that's as popular as this was.
Right.
And so it became a happening, and gosh, people came from everywhere to hang out, and I started bringing people down to play at the club, and I'd look out in the audience, and there'd be people, somebody would say, oh, so-and-so from this band or so-and-so from that band came in tonight. It was really dark in there, It was... It started out as kind of the worst Mexican restaurant in town, but it was it used to be a Chinese restaurant at one time, and I worked there when I was in high school as in the jazz lounge. But the jazz lounge had become sort of a honky tonk bar, and the restaurant had become kind of a Chinese version of a Mexican restaurant.
Boy, that is really hard.
Didn't make it as a Mexican restaurant very much, but the El Bandito did make it as an after hours club, and so
And
anybody who was ever in that place, I always remember it. I get people that come up to me, even here in the Bay Area, say, "I remember you from the El Bandito." So it was a good time in Arizona, and those couple of years that I spent there.
What at this point? What do you see in the students that you teach now? Are they looking to be exploratory? Are they looking for to be technically sort of proficient? How have you seen students change as far as their mentality over the years, if at all?
That's a good question. People who study with me generally are pretty serious, and I really don't try to influence them in what style of music they want to play. I have rock drummers, and I have jazz drummers, and I have drummers who've gone on to get college degrees, and drummers who've gone on to be quite well known. And sometimes I work with the well-known drummers as a coach in just one area or another. I worked with Steve Smith on Polyrhythmic. Steve Smith of Journey, and now his own band, Vital Information, and he's a marvelous drummer. And it's an honor to work with these guys. They're so damn good, And so the art has a lot of interest, and it's really progressed. The live music scene is a little bit off right now. It's going someplace. I don't know where yet. But,
it is off. It's off. There's no doubt it's off.
But I'm busy, so I really can't complain. I'm having a pretty. I've been enjoying a real busy spell in my career, and I don't feel like I'm some old guy playing the drums. I'm sort of like right in the middle of what I love to do. So, I know I have history, and I'm so honored that someone like yourself just picks up on it and says, "Hey, Pete, I know something about what you've done." I really appreciate that, Jake. And as all the guys you're talking to who are my age, and still out there doing it, we all appreciate that a lot. And there's not many people that sort of look up your past. They're always interested in what can you do for me now. So it's great.
Yeah, I knew somehow that when the opportunity came, when I was kind of mature enough to take on this role of a radio host, that I was going to do something in a niche capacity, and it just took about 3 months to really figure out that I was completely dedicated to the music during this time period. I speak of the early 70s and the mid 70s, and guys like yourself, because it was to me, nowadays you sign this is not so much true for jazz, but for a lot of commercial musicians, you sign a contract for $10 million or something like that. I don't know where the desperate edge is insofar as making music, making quality music. Whereas back in the 60s and 70s, there was exploration, and quite frankly, nobody was getting rich off of it anyway. So it was really just about the love of playing, and that just shines through the music completely. And when I talk to the guys now, a lot of them, like Henry Franklin, the bass player in Southern California, or John Hurd, they're playing at Italian restaurants, or they're playing at the Mission Inn, and they're still just trying to do their thing. But I don't want to. If it's one thing that I want to do on this show, I do not want people to forget, or in fact, I want people to be enlightened about what I consider to be the greatest period of jazz music in our history. And I know people would fight me on that tooth and nail, but that's my role, is to highlight that. And so it is great. You do owe me one thing, and that is when I do come to the Bay Area, I just would love to get you and Larry Vukovic and John Hurd or George, whoever's available, just to come, and we could have an old time jam session, just like the Half Note in '65. If you could help me out with that, it would be great. I don't know how flexible everybody is, but I'm gonna come up there, man, because that's the next step, is to continue. We have 51 minutes here, and obviously you sat through all my great commercials for my Chinese restaurant and my Thai restaurant. I love all that, but I'm also dedicated to making personal connections out of this, and making it a tribute, a primary source tribute, so that someday some younger Peter Magadini who's out doing research because they're curious and they're interested and they want to look back on this, and they're going to have an opportunity to actually hear you in full voice. So it's been a pleasure. Just before we go, I had to ask you about one final guy. We only got a couple minutes here. He's one of my favorite drummers, and a guy that had a profound influence on you, and that was Roy Burns. And I was just hoping you could talk to the audience a little bit about who he was and what he meant to your career.
Roy Burns taught me in New York when I lived in New York in the early 60s, and I moved to New York to study, and I studied with Roy Burns. And now Roy Burns is the head of Aquarian Drumheads, and he was also a great drummer, played with a lot of people, and great technician, and he's done a lot for my career, as he has done for a lot of other people's careers. But, one other thing is you have to think, you're talking about the 70s as if it's a long time ago, but if we were talking about Beethoven or Mozart or something and their music, man, that would be just like yesterday if we're talking about 30 years ago or 40 years ago. This music is still out there, and it's still making its mark. I think there's an awful lot of music that I just got through reading Miles Davis' autobiography, and it just brought me into that whole New York scene and what it was like in the 40s and the 50s. And, that was the music that I grew up on. And I'm still listening to those guys play as great as they were. Still a lot of people are just, they've left a lot to be discovered. Let me put it that way.
Well said, my friend. And I just can't thank you enough, and look forward to doing it again, hopefully in person. And I wish you all the best with the upcoming Mose Allison and Diane Krall tour that you're about to embark on. So
concert, come up and sit next to me up there at Harris, man. I'll play drums, and we'll have, when I'm not playing drums, we can still chat.
Oh, it sounds great, Pete. Hey, listen, this is the Jake Feinberg Show. We've been talking to Peter Magadini, and we'll see you all next week. Thanks a lot, Pete.
All right. Thanks a lot, Jake.
KJLL, South Tucson.
CBS News, I'm Sam Litzinger. The Army Corps of Engineers has opened the Morganza Spillway on the Mississippi River for the first time in nearly 4 decades.